Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Jeff S., Nick W., Luke A., and Andy S. We have a returning guest on the program today. Mr. Keith Bodnarchuk is back with us. Keith is the president and CEO of Cosa Resources, an Athabasca basin-focused exploration company with early-stage exploration projects throughout the basin, mostly on the eastern side of the basin, including the main focus exploration projects at the Ursa Project, Orion, Aurora, and Astro, among some other projects as well. The team at Cosa has significant exploration experience, with the most recent success of the Hurricane Uranium discovery at ISO Energy in the 2020-2021 timeframe. Cosa Resources is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol COSA, as well as on the US OTC markets under the symbol COSAF. Keith, thank you for coming back on the program to update. Welcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here again.
Yeah, Keith, it's always good to chat with you. Great to have you come back and agree to having an update podcast here. Middle of the year. Of course, things are a little bit boring out there, but what do you expect? It's the uranium sector. This is how it goes. And I don't know how many times I've seen it, but we've seen it plenty of times. But first, you've been randomly selected to receive a question about your favorite beverage. So what is your favorite beverage that you drink? It can be any time of the day, work or leisure. Tell us about that.
Wow. Okay. Hard-hitting first question. I would say coffee, to be honest. I'm a big coffee person. I probably didn't start drinking it until I was in my mid-20s, but ever since then, I've definitely had coffee every day and continue to have coffee and have no plans to ever stop drinking coffee. And I can pretty much do it most times of day, even in the evening. And so, yeah, coffee is definitely my beverage of choice.
Excellent. Well, some of the coffee producers in Central and South America will be pleased to hear about that, at least in this region, and then, of course, others around the world. So I can't disagree. I do like coffee myself quite a bit and probably picked up the habit somewhere around when you did as well in my 20s. So appreciate the comments there and for entertaining that one. I want to jump right into recent news going back to the maiden drill program at Ursa and the findings coming out of that. And of course, interpretation work continues, I'm sure, but I'm sure you have some interpretations so far. I want to start there, and then we'll move into the planned summer drill program next.
Yeah, no, sounds good to me. So yeah, as you mentioned, we did complete our maiden drill program at Ursa this past winter, really in March and April. So taking a step back, when we've originally started discussing the Ursa project, we looked at it covering this Cable Bay Shear Zone, which is an underexplored, long linear northeastern uranium corridor that hasn't seen much exploration in the past. And so what we did is we started applying modern exploration techniques to it, which included that airborne geophysics, which identified 10 key target areas, within this long 60-kilometer trend that we had. We went in this winter, it'd be in January, and we did ground geophysics over 5 of those key target areas. And then we really started to prioritize those 5 target areas and figure out which one we wanted to test first. And we ended up testing the Kodiak target area first. It's one where, so anytime you enter into a new area, it's good in the sense that you have wide open space. There hasn't been much exploration. There's huge upside to go after those tier 1 size deposits, but there is also limited information, limited ways to vector in towards a target area. And so we chose a Kodiak target area because it had a geophysical anomaly, which we were looking for, but it also had a boulder anomaly, meaning that, there's been multiple glaciations over that area in the past, millions of years. Usually what happens is when glaciers cover that area, they'll scour boulders in a certain direction, and those boulders will have come from original source rock, which could be above a uranium deposit. And so what we found was a boulder anomaly close to this Kodiak target area. So it really added an additional layer of prioritizing this as the first area to test. So we went in March and April. We drilled 3 holes across a fence. The first 2 were interesting, but weren't really hitting exactly what we're looking for. Then the third one, UR2403, started to intersect some interesting sandstone alteration. And remember, for your listeners, we are targeting unconformity style uranium deposits, which is similar to Cigar Lake, McArthur River, Hurricane, Phoenix, a lot of the great deposits on the east side of the Athabasca Basin. And so what happens is you have this uranium deposit right at the unconformity, but around that uranium deposit, you'll have these massive alteration zones that go up into the sandstone. And in order to hone in on these deposits, you look to start hitting these alteration zones to help guide you on which direction to head to hopefully hit that uranium deposit. Because, for example, something like Phoenix will be 250 meters long, Hurricane will be a couple hundred meters long. And so you look, but the alteration halos around these things might be, a kilometer long. And so these alteration zones really help guide you towards a potential uranium deposit. And in the third hole, we hit signs of key ingredients that we look for in an alteration zone. Things like bleaching of the sandstone or dravite. These are kind of a bit buzzwords, but they're words that are associated with these key ingredients, what you look for in these alteration zones. And so for us, for first pass drilling, to intersect what we view as significant alteration, which could help guide us for our future drill program here this summer, it really exceeded our expectations, and it makes us excited to go follow up this program in the summer.
Appreciate that information there, and one of the things that noticed, and of course expected to some degree, it's hard to always predict these things, but exactly how they'll play out. But there was certainly some expectation that somehow the first program was going to result in some massive mineralization. And I think, folks have to be put back in their chair just a little bit to understand that these programs sometimes are to study and optimize and make even your next program better. And it takes a few programs. And I think participants need to remember that it's not always the first time always hits. And it actually takes more than that to actually get there. And so just want to remind the folks that I think the overall results coming out gave some good data and insights to be able to perform better selection of where we're going to put that now based on the data that we now have. Because you can do all the airborne surveys you want, not everything. The reality is you have to be able to test these things, optimize, come back, go to the drawing board, and come back and try again. And that's what you guys are doing. Some of that is coming back here in the summer program. I'd like to have you talk about that as far as your plan to test out a new target that's been prioritized, and then also follow up on some adjustments to the winter program, as well as magnetic and gravity surveys coming on Orbit and Aurora. But for now, why don't you just cover the priority target and how that was selected at Ursa, and then of course the follow-up work.
Yeah, so I did mention that this Kodiak target area, which was our first target area we selected at Ursa, it did have additional layer of a boulder anomaly to add on to the geophysics anomaly. And I think it's important to note that when our previous company we worked at, ISO Energy, how the group came across Hurricane deposit was they hit some structure and alteration, or they looked at a previous hole that had structure and alteration up in the sandstone higher up, and they projected that down to the unconformity, and that's where they ultimately made the discovery of Hurricane. And so this is not the exact same scenario, but what we saw here in our third hole was structure and alteration way up in the sandstone, which projects down, and we have not hit the optimal target yet. There's obviously no guarantees when you're following up these kind of results, but it is significant, right? And I would say it's more than data points and stuff. This was a significant result, and it's really going to guide us for our first few holes of the summer drill program. And so, immediately we'll be able to go and follow up that third hole. Another thing we're also doing is, so we have drilled these fence holes, and we also need an additional layer of data to help guide us which direction we go from there. Following up UR2403, that's an easy target to go drill right away, but we are applying ANT right now, which is ambient noise tomography. We're applying it over a big area of the Ursa Project. You've seen other groups in the basin start to talk a lot about ANT. It's not a new technology, but it's new to the basin, and basically it's a form of seismic. It can help map structure and alteration in the sandstone, which I said is kind of the key ingredient for these unconformity style deposits, because you got to find these big, large alteration halos before you can find the deposit. And so we're applying that right now. We should be collecting the data here in the next few weeks. and then we should have results on that coming out sometime this summer ahead of our drill program. And really what we're looking for is an anomaly to help guide us in and around the UR2403 hole, and also maybe some anomalies further along in the project, right? Because sometimes it is difficult to locate yourself when you have initial good results like we are. Maybe the sweet spot we're looking for could be 400 meters away. Maybe it's 200 meters away in the other direction. I think, adding this additional layer of data with the ANT, will be a big significant step for us because it can really help guide us which direction to go to help follow up these initial, key results really at UR2403. And you kind of look at the peers, some of the results they've been releasing based off targeting ANT, and they've been hitting interesting structure and alteration. So it seems to be working, right? And so it's a cost-effective layer that we're going to add to really help guide us for this summer at Ursa.
Definitely all of these components, these various technologies and the analysis plays into where you guys put that bit and of course get that confirmation or at least get more results coming out there. So really appreciate that. It's a lot of work and definitely takes a lot of analysis. And as we stated at the front, you guys have quite a team I think will guide us in the right direction. But of course, people just got to be reminded it takes time, it takes money, and it takes a lot of effort. And very rarely do you knock it out of the park, I suppose, on the first swing. On timing of the work, just talk a little bit about when you would expect to have this summer campaign completely concluded and when you would start to see results come out. Maybe let's just talk about the drill bit results. When would you start to see that flow out?
Yeah, so we'll be actively drilling. Should be on pace for August, maybe end of July if things fall in place perfectly. But looking in August into September. So we'll be updating the market as we go along there. Importantly, ahead of that, we will have ANT results and really an update on the exact drill targets we'll be going after this summer. So yeah, really I'd look for August, September, but also a lot of key updates here in July, end of June ahead of that program. And so yeah, we're excited for that. I encourage everybody to keep an eye on the news flow coming out of that area. And the good news is we can actively update the market as we drill, especially when we start following up these results at UR2403.
Yeah, Keith, thank you for that. And there's a good price in the market right now, I would say. So I think folks have an opportunity there to consider this. Obviously, it's super high risk, but I think folks can consider this, look at the price, and make their own decisions on that. On capital structure, I'd like to get an update there because, of course, there was a financing done earlier this year as well. But just talk about the cash position, where we are there, how far that gets us, and then, of course, shares outstanding and major shareholders on the roster.
Yeah, certainly. So cash-wise, you're correct. We completed a $6.5 million financing in March. Completed that just ahead of our initial drill program. So we're sitting around $7 million in the bank currently. That'll take us all the way throughout 2024 exploration program. So we're in good shape that way. I think, received strong support on that financing. It was oversubscribed. We had a few key funds that came in that have been strong supporters of us in the past and continue to maintain or even increase their position from previous financings. So we remain extremely tightly held, just under 57 million shares outstanding. I think, you mentioned it is a good buy opportunity. I agree. The prices of a lot of the uranium juniors have scaled back over the past few weeks or months. We still have those same key ingredients you look for. We can really provide that upward torque on the share price in that we're extremely tightly held. We are fully funded for the remainder of the year. And, we continue to buy on market ourselves. I think you can look at my SEDI filings. I continue to buy on market. And so we kind of have that key ingredient we look for with our capital structure to add in with, really exciting targets coming up over the next few months. Yeah, so we're just under 57 million shares outstanding.
Okay, I want to ask you, you have brought on some additional staff recently with the appointment of a senior geologist. Tell us, the audience, a little bit about Daniel and what he brings to the table.
We obviously continue to strengthen the team, which is, from a technical standpoint, already extremely strong. And, Dan has spent his entire career at Orano, which was previously Riva. He's worked on all their key projects throughout Canada, and he really brings a long history of working uranium exploration, mostly focused in Saskatchewan. And so he also brings a different outlook on it, right? My background, obviously Denison and ISO Energy. Most of all of us, the rest of us, are at ISO Energy, where Dan will bring in, kind of a view, which was held at an even larger company in Uranium. And so I think adding that into the fold just only strengthens the way we look at things, how we target, what we do on certain results. And so, I mean, the bench strength of our team continues to improve, and to have Dan on the team is just another huge addition.
Keith, and talk about just for a moment, I always want to get your thoughts on this, of course, as well. And we like to have our guests have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the broader uranium market and, of course, the sentiment out there for the juniors. But how do you see that right now? We've seen the sentiment in the lower end of the juniors come off substantially. No surprise there. We've seen it before. And then, of course, uranium market conditions. It seems people have a pretty short attention span, or patience span, if you will. But uranium market conditions, any thoughts there that you want to mention to the audience?
Yeah, it is interesting because there is disconnect, you would say, between the valuations of the juniors relative to what's happening in the overall uranium market and really the nuclear power industry. And so, I mean, this is the strongest I've ever seen the uranium industry. You see continued news flow even out of the US talking about doubling their nuclear power capacity. And, this is sentiment for nuclear power remains as strong as it's ever been. Every country that keeps updating the market, they continue to build or work towards building nuclear power plants. And so this disconnect it's somewhat confusing, but maybe that's the opportunity, right? It's the opportunity is staring right at us, in the sense that you have a lot of these junior companies that haven't seen their valuation increase. There was access to capital, like a few of the key juniors are able to access capital, us included, to continue to explore. But you never saw the valuations go up like you did with I guess you'd call them the larger juniors, or even the mid caps, right? And that never got corrected. And so when you saw this pullback, you've seen the juniors, and they never got to see the significant increase, but they also started to pull back. And so the valuations are phenomenally low on the uranium juniors. And I think us especially, with when you consider that tight cap structure, the fact we're fully funded, the group that we have with the track record of making these discoveries. And so I think there's a big opportunity there, and that's why I continue to buy, Cosa. I think it's extremely undervalued, and so that I believe that is the opportunity that's staring investors right in the face, is just that the juniors haven't seen that re-rate, but when it finally does happen, it's going to come in quick. I'm hoping that we can see something even later this year would be ideal.
I agree with your views on this. It's funny because you've got some brand names, if you will, that are trading at close to their all-time high or at their all-time high. Valuations are elevated for some of those, depending on the stage of company. And then some of the juniors, the small juniors, obviously, Keith, you and I both agree that some of them deserve a zero, but a lot of them do have good value there, including Cosa. Presents us with a fantastic opportunity. I think overall for us, our concern is not with the uranium market itself. That's all good and healthy, but really just the broad market is a bit more of a concern over here at this time. Our take would change as we progress through this year here. We'll see how things go, but definitely a compelling opportunity here yet again. And we've seen, I want to say at least three opportunities like this throughout the cycle in our time being here, going back to 2016 timeframe. So once again, I think for the people who have the patience, who have the solvency, can continue to play along here and allocate properly to this, despite some of the risks. And I think we'll be rewarded as time goes on here. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. One other question just on Cosa here, as far as just longer term schedule at this point, Keith. And I know this is completely subject to existing work and priorities and the outcomes of the existing work, but the company has a handful of other projects.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other work you want to mention or expect to get done between now and say through 2025?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I said this in past interviews. We like to maintain that pipeline of targets. Ursa is showing significant results, especially early on, and we think we have a fantastic opportunity there. But sometimes these things don't pan out, so we do like to keep that pipeline of opportunities. And it's important to remember, at ISO, which is one of the quickest, I'd say, companies to significant discovery, it was a couple of years, and it was the seventh project where we ultimately found Hurricane. And so we have other projects in Aurora and Orbit that we're currently doing geophysics on. They'll have targets that are ready to drill for 2025. Orion is another project we have where it has a extremely significant target sitting on it. So we are doing A&T over that area because it's right next to, it's essentially an extension of the Ursa project itself, but it doesn't quite connect because Areva owns the ground in between, so we can't quite connect those two projects. But yeah, Orion is another one with a fantastic target that's sitting there, and we always take the approach that we'll drill our best targets in that order. And so we will to make sure that, you know, if the Kodiak target area doesn't pan out Ursa, we'll have other projects ready to go for 2025. I'm ready to drill. And Aurora and Orbit are interesting in the sense that they are right by Key Lake, right? They're 18 kilometers away from a currently operating mill. And so that is interesting target area for us to have ready for 2025. Plus it is shallower targets, right? Or it's a good counterbalance to Ursa where we're going for that massive tier 1 deposit. Aurora and Orbit kind of provide a counterbalance where you won't necessarily need a tier 1 size deposit because of its location being within proximity to a mill and really in an easier accessible area of the Athabasca Basin. So yeah, definitely we have other projects in the pipeline. We're always looking to upgrade that pipeline through cost-effective acquisitions. Never be satisfied in that regard. We'll keep continuing to look for opportunities to upgrade that pipeline because, you know, the moment you kind of stop, you might miss that opportunity to make that next great discovery. So we've always taken that approach even at ISO, even after discovery of Hurricane. We're always making sure that the pipeline of opportunities at ISO remains strong. So we continue to do that at Cosa, and we'll continue to focus on that along with, you know, obviously following up these interesting targets at Ursa.
Pipeline, very important. Fully agreed with your guys' approach and strategy on that. Well, Keith, let's finish up here. Thank you for the update. Why don't we leave it there for now? But of course, any other comments you want to add here, but I'll leave you with this. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 14 million Canadian dollars. Why should Cosa Resources be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors portfolio at this point?
We're a team that's done it multiple times. If you can look back to our history through ISO Energy, Denison, obviously Craig at NextGen, you know, we've really created a lot of value over the years. We have good targets. We had a very interesting, I'd say significant first drill program at Ursa that's really going to guide us for the summer program. We're fully funded and our cap structure remains tight. And so we kind of have all those ingredients that stack on to each other that create, you know, this opportunity where if we do have success, you'll really see it reflect in our share price.
Very concise, Keith, and well said. Thank you for that. Best way for folks to contact the company?
You can log onto our website. There's an email address you can use to contact us there. Obviously, maybe reach out to me on LinkedIn, other things I'm active on. Obviously, Twitter. We have a company Twitter. Wherever you really want to get in contact with our company, there's lots of means through social media. But going to our website and emailing our info would be a good way to do it.
Keith, always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks again for the update and best of luck on the upcoming work. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andrew.